Welcome. Today we continue our conversation with Carolyn Dahl, artist and writer from Houston, Texas. We've been talking in the last few episodes about the concept of archiving and the importance of recording and saving some of these stories. Thank you, Carolyn, for joining us again for this important conversation.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here, and I love to talk about archives because I think they're so very, very important to women. So I'm happy to be here again.
Yes, and we've mentioned you talked a lot about why it's important and why these histories matter and how historians will be able to learn from some of the stories and things that we leave behind. Today we want to dive in and talk a little bit about the emotions that are connected to letting go and that whole process of that.
I think it's a complex one because what you have to think about, first of all, when you archive, whether it's a personal for your family or professional one like mine, which would be a public one at a university, is that you are basically letting go of your history for the most part. And so in a sense, what I found was that it almost felt like I was letting go of a part of myself. So that was a very interesting experience because it was something almost as if I were mourning the loss of a part of myself. And yet I was the one who had decided to release some of myself, to release all these papers, all these, things that establish who I am. It wasn't fate that forced me to it, me. So I think that was part of why I ran through a gamut of emotions, and I would say that they kind of broke into two parts. One was bringing the archive from Texas to Minnesota, across the whole country, and then when I delivered it and then bringing it back, and my feelings when I was back in the house. So I want to take you back just a little bit in order for you to understand my emotions to the process of delivery, because that was filled with a lot of emotions. I packed the car up with the help of my husband. We packed up Shadowcatcher. We name all our cars. And it was totally full with like 17 boxes. And then we drove all the way. And it was really interesting because the first emotion that I experienced was huge anxiety and stress and a sense of like, oh dear, some catastrophic thing could happen. Like we would have an accident and the car would burn up and there would go whole life. And then we stopped one night at a hotel. And this was funny too, because we got a room that we could look at the parking lot. And then we spent about 15 minutes finding the right spot under a light where we the car so that I could get up at night numerous times and look out there and be sure the car was okay. So that was my first emotion, was really stress. Then when we arrived at the university, this was the University of Minnesota, I had this funny feeling. We had to park outside of a big garage. They open up to bring in the boxes. And I had this feeling like I made a mistake. They're going to say, Carolyn Dahl, who? We don't have you for an archive. And then I got just so like this panic, like they're not going to want me now after all this. But they did. And it was all arranged. And the people came out and loaded up my boxes and put them into what was basically a very big open garage. And then I experienced another type of emotion. It was like, oh no, they're putting my boxes, which have slides of my art, on the concrete. And then I felt very protective and worried about them. But eventually I got over that because I looked at the room, and this is what's interesting that you don't often understand about archival while you're there, is that before me were boxes, tons of boxes that had to be gone through before mine could even be, assessed. And I realized how many times, we talked about in the first section about my motivation was cleaning out my mother's and my uncle's house. And I realized by the boxes, the poor labeling, that these were boxes families had just picked up papers, thrown them in, and giving them to the archive. So that was very interesting. Then we went down into the vaults, and at the University of Minnesota, every kind of archive will have a different situation. A lot of them are libraries, and there will be, a lot of shelves above ground in some of their storage areas. But for the university, you actually go way down into a vault, and you have this sense, like I felt going underground. And then it opens up, and most universities or big archives are like this. It opens up to just rows of shelves with tiny little aisles, and there are boxes and boxes and boxes, all alike. And I felt like I had come to the drawer of souls, or that like it was the cemetery of minds, because in every one of those boxes, and this is why I'm encouraging people to archive, is that we had saved the very best in those boxes of the person's mind and life accomplishments. And so it was kind of like there was their soul inside. And I was very, very humble. That was the next feeling that I had, honored that I was going to be a part of all these boxes, because I almost was crying inside. It was very emotional to see this. It was almost, I suppose, without being morbid, it was like sort of standing in a cemetery where you're going to be buried, because I was thinking, I'm going to be here. One of these boxes is going to be me someday. And I was just so honored and humbled by that. And I think anyone doing a public kind of archive will feel that too. And maybe you'll just move it to another location, your own safety deposit box to save it or something, but you'll have this sense that what was probably the best of you is being saved for future generations. So besides feeling that honor, because I was going to be in the same archive with Robert Bly, who's a huge poet, James Wright, Jacqueline Orr Larson, who is the biggest name in textiles, and I was a textile artist. People like that, Milkwood Press, Grey Wolf Press, all people that I read, and little Carolyn, with her archive, going to be somewhere in with all the others. So I was very honored, but then I had this overwhelming feeling of gratitude to places like this institution that put money, funding, whatever to keep these things. So that was our venture through my emotions during the time of actual delivery. Besides really admiring the institution, which had funded all of it, I really liked my archivist, which is nice because she had the same kind of sensibility. And I call myself a preservationist because I think that's a very positive term, because what it means is that we find things that perhaps other people are discarding or they think they're valuable, but we find a value and an important meaning to them. So that's the reason that we save these objects. You're not a hoarder, you're not someone that needs to declutter. You value these things, and that's a totally different kind of concept. And she was like that. She was a preservationist too. So I really felt that I had come home because I went to school there, and it was like everything felt right when I left. But then we went outside and we went to our car, which was empty. And you know how you feel in an empty house before you move in or after you leave? And there's this feeling of vacancy. And on one hand, it's marvelous because there's that potential to fill, but there's also sort of a loneliness to it, even though it's light and the car is now airy and shadow catcher is probably riding, about 4 inches higher from the weight. But it's just that there was a feeling of strangeness. And I couldn't really kind of talk because I had myself, what I felt was myself, my past, inside this garage. So we left. And I had this feeling of being very kind of confused and lost and kind of like, now what am I, sort of? I'm not that anymore. I've closed that off. Who am I now? And I also, though, felt the need to like celebrate. this was an accomplishment. This was wonderful. The archive is finished. So I had both those feelings. So we went to the Milkweed bookstore, which is in the archive too. And we bought a bunch of books, which always makes me feel better to go into a bookstore. And we went out to eat and had a glass of wine and celebrated. And I told my husband, take a picture of me, because I wanted to preserve the expression on my face, because it's kind of like a melancholy, but still sort of happy, but kind of confused. I recognized it as a very strange look that I felt. But anyhow, we did that. We went to the Guthrie and sat out and looked at the river. And I had been a student when Guthrie first built the first one. And so that kind of closed off that moment. So that's what I would call the first circle of emotions I went through, which will help you to kind of understand the second half. So is there anything that you want to ask about that first before I talk about the second, about being back home?
I really think that what resonates, so thank you for sharing that all the different emotions connected to passing on your history and putting it in those archives. Two things stand up: the cemetery of minds, where everything is collected, but also your reference to being a preservationist, seeing value in things, and tied to that, seeing the value of even organizing that, having seen those boxes that were just kind of shelved without any organization to it. So that goes hand in hand with being a preservationist. It's definitely not just hoarding, but it's organizing and preserving in a way that will help future historians.
Right, and also your family, if you're doing one, because like I said in one of the earlier podcasts, you don't want to kind of leave that all to your family, because they don't know the stories behind your papers or your letters or whatever unless you tell them, and then they may not remember it. So consequently, you need to add your stories, and then they develop a real importance in their life and other people. So I think it's really important to value those things that might be tossed, but not to leave it to your family to have to do it. I think it's your responsibility. Even part of it is to start early and just organize some of it and leave them a list. Just tell them this goes to the University of Minnesota, this goes to the University of Houston, or this is to go to my granddaughter, so-and-so. It makes it so much easier.
That makes so much
So
sense. Yes. Very good advice. Very
right,
good.
I think so. And start early. I said that before, but start early, because it is a job. And also because the fact that if you start early, you will have some of your older relatives around who will still be able to verify the stories and really kind of decide, what to keep and what is good. And also there are so many different ways that you can collect it. There are books out now that say asking grandma questions, or you can put them in a journal, you can put them in a video, you can do photographs with extensive captions.
Right.
Or you really just even make a list, or there are software programs now too, like Storybook, where you talk into it, and then in the end there's a book, and then you can have multiples made and give to your whole family, which I think is wonderful too. But I have way too much for that. But anyhow, that's all things to really think about. But I do want to prepare you for the emotions, because I think I'm not alone. I think that most of you out there, women with stories that want to tell their intimate, that want to tell their personal stories, we have enough of the official honed kind of histories. But what we need to hear are from the individuals like all of you or me or Brenda. Those are the personal histories that need to be out there. So if you are preparing an archive, either personal or a public one like I was doing, I think that the emotions that I'm talking about, that you're going to experience a lot of them too. I don't think they're just for me. I think there's something that all of us as women, because we tend to record stories that are personal and more intimate. You know, lots of times women do not have the chance to make the official historical document. So that's why it's so important that you record your stories and keep your papers, because that will be the other side of history. And it's usually the most interesting side. So I think you'll experience the same kind of things that I experience at. And so I encourage you really to do an archive. And it's nice and it's not bad, the feelings that you experience, because they make you think about your life deeper when you have those kind of feelings like honoring or gratitude to an institution, or a feeling of loss, or that's my past, that's my history, what have I done, I've left it. So it's really very good evaluative questions too. Okay, now we have driven from Minnesota to Texas, and I'm home in my house, and I'm looking at the spaces that are left in the closet, and I'm feeling really good because there's a lot of open space now I can take. I know that the things that were there are in a safe vault, deep in the ground, humidity controlled, watched over by this wonderful archivist and her staff. So it's kind of like I feel the need to celebrate in the sense that I have relief that I have removed things from my home. Important things, but I have created more space. I have a deep sense of accomplishment because, as I said before, I worked on this a long time. I mean, I maybe over a period of time of months, even not every day, but sorting, putting them in the boxes, collecting them. So I really felt I had accomplished something because I had researched a lot of archives, also packaged them, decided how to organize them. And this was what I said before, that I had included the stories in each one of those files. And I'm a living donor in the sense that I'm alive when I'm giving them. Most papers come when people are deceased. So that's the interesting part. If you start early, is you have the chance to add your stories. I also felt that I had somehow closed my careers. I wasn't a singer anymore. All the memorabilia with that, all the brochures, all the programs were in the archive now. So that career was done. I wasn't really an artist that was traveling, teaching, writing books, appearing on television in that for my art, or exhibiting in galleries. I wasn't doing that necessarily anymore because all the materials that I would have needed to make those applications were now gone. I will still do art, but it might take a different direction. It might not be textile work so much. And then I had such a pleasure in the sense that I felt that I had done something in my strange little way, my tiny little way, for the future, because I had provided them, which you will, what was life like in 2024? What was it like in 1970? Those documents will be there, and future researchers will be able to use it. Not about Carolyn Dahl, but about what was the times, what was it like to live in those times? That's what my gives, not so much about me, but what was it like to be an artist during that time? What was it like to be a singer? So much has changed that it's really important, I think, to have it documented. What was it like in the past? What did people do? That. And then, of course, there was this strange thing. I would say something to somebody, well, I was understudied to Anna Maria Brigetti or something back, and they'd say, well, what year was that? And I'll go, because I'm terrible with years and numbers and stuff like that. And I'd go, oh, I don't know. I better check my program. And then I would go, I don't have that program. I can no longer check and verify those things, unless I were to go to the archive and ask them. But so there was sort of a sense of relief in that too. That was done. I don't have to check. I don't have to find out all that information. So I did have a touch of regret in the sense that I thought, did I do it too soon? Should I have waited? But in the end, I don't think I did. I think it's never too soon. If you're even 50, which I consider young now, so go ahead and start it, because I think it's very important. It takes a while to do it. And the other thing is, of course, I'm not done. I'm still a producing writer. I'm still getting publications in that. So I am still gathering material. And that's the nice part about an archive. You can add you want. And like I mentioned before, my journals, the journals will come, and this is something to consider. Say you have some letters you want to include for next generations, but feel a little awkward about it because you mentioned someone in there and you feel like, well, maybe they would be upset or something. You can put a hold on them. Like I can put a hold on my journals. They cannot be read for 50 years or something. You can do the same. And by that time, anyone that you might have offended would not be around to be, probably. So then it's safe to allow researchers into it. So I continue, continuing with that, and I'm working journals. I'm blacking out things that I feel would hurt somebody else, even though my archivist doesn't want to do that, me to do that. But I'm also still using my journals for my writing. So consequently, it's kind of like, I'm not ready to get them. They will be my last thing. That will be the boxes in the garage that probably someone will put in a box and put them there. But anyhow, there was, just thinking about closure on this, there was a quote that I wanted to mention to you from Charles Baxter, who's a wonderful prose writer. And he said, we are preserving through the art forms that he's talking about, but it can be an archive, anything, what everyone else is discarding. How things were when we lived, how people felt, how did we feel, how did women feel, and what people did. That will be in our archives. And Faulkner said that what it does is it arrests motion. It fixes it. And motion is life. So that in 100 years, a stranger looks at it and it'll move again with life. And I think that's so beautiful, because that's what I think we want our stories to do. We want them in time, so that later women or later researchers, or who knows, because we don't really know if anyone's going to even open the boxes. It's kind of like planting a tree for the future, but maybe someone will, and all of a sudden that time period will come to life again. So that's why they're really important.
Thank you so much for sharing the process. I mean, it is incredible from our previous two conversations to now. You've taken this full circle, and it's beautiful that you said that you're still working on your next chapter. You're still a work of art in process, actually. Any surprises along the way?
In what way do you mean? Like, there were surprises in the sense, when I went through my material, there were many things that I forgot. And then when I read it, I went, oh, I did that. Or yeah, I remember him. Or I remember this correlation that I had never put the two together. Something like that. Or like with my family history, I would look at the background of a photo and I might see the background of the house we lived in. And then I kind of had an idea what time period it was. And then I would look at another one, I go, oh, I'm wearing that same dress. So that must have been in that time period. So there were puzzle pieces that fell together that were surprises, but it was not like I had any scandalous revelation. Fortunately, nothing like that. And so, not like a big surprise, organizational surprises. And you start making links. Oh, and what you do also, and this is really important, I think, is that you begin to see the flow of your life. You see the history of it, especially if you go from childhood and then you organize it. And I think chronological is the best to really see this. Organize it until your present day, and then look back and see, what are the themes? What were my dreams? Are they still my dreams? Did I realize them in the middle? Where did I make that little turn? And you'll be able to see kind of the trajectory of your life. As I said once before, it was kind of like when you asked me, who was I really? I said, what I learned through the archive was that I was a creative person who lived her whole life in the creative arts, and I was so grateful I could. But that started right away in childhood on, whereas at any point I could have detoured. I could have become something else. I could have gone to work for a company, or I might have done something else and my life could have changed. But when I did the archive, I saw that everything in my life was about that.
That's absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you again for sharing that. Carolyn, again, thank you so much for all the insight and sharing your journey, because it definitely gives us some how-to steps, and also some what to expect as we maybe embark on something like this. Except as you were talking and letting everything go, I think I'm going to have to fight against the tendency of wanting to keep duplicates just in case I do need something. You were saying, well, it's in the archives, I don't have it. I'm like, oh, ouch. I think I might still want a duplicate on certain things.
Well, and I think that was one reason. One of the things that I included also were inventories in all the different files, so that consequently I could go back and see, well, I had given this to them. And if I were doing it again, I probably would even add some of those dates. I would probably say, okay, West Side Story, and then just a date. Because I'm already giving the story, being an understudy in this production. So I could very easily put the date, but I didn't think of that at the time. So that's something I've learned.
Now, I'm curious though, because now that you continue your work as a writer, and this, whatever comes next in this next chapter,
Yeah.
is it a little different knowing that going into this, that you are going to be archiving, that you continue this process?
It is definitely, because one thing that I have done, like recently I had a publication, an anthology, and they will usually give you a complimentary copy, and sometimes I buy some for my sisters or family. But this time I bought an extra one, and you know what it was for. It's to put in the archive, and yet I can still have one at home to use or read, or if I have to do a reading from it. So that is one thing that has been very different. The other thing is that I am learning more about my particular archive. And at the University of Minnesota, at their Anderson Library, they have a rare book collection. And I love books, and I love old books, and I have collected a bunch of them. So now I'm kind of gathering a box of what I think might be unusual books or very old books, which I would have never thought about collecting books before. And that is something that I've just learned, because I've learned that about my archive, which I didn't know. So I think the longer you work with an archive, you learn, what might be their specialties or their special collections, things like that. But I think that also, in a general way, I would say yes. Now I think like an archivist. Like I look at things and I say, well, would this be worthwhile to keep? Or should I save it or should I duplicate it? I take pictures of things now, like if I'm releasing a picture or a magazine or something, I just snap it on the cell phone so that I have it and then I can release it, or if I want to print it out later. So I'm thinking always about, I may have to give this one up. So yeah, it has changed. It has made me into a type of archivist, actually, because I'm thinking along the way that they do. And when I'm storing my things, everything needs to be archival. So I'm finding that now I'm having to go out, and buy the archival things. And then before I would have stored it in any old thing, not anymore. It's like all archival because I know eventually I have to donate it in that respect.
Well, I know that we could go on and on, but I know that it would be wonderful to hear another of your poems to close out the podcast.
So that would be wonderful. And I have one that is from my book, Art Preserves What Can't Be Saved. And it's the title poem in this book. And the reason I picked it is because I am Gainsborough's future. In other words, it's a poem, it's an acrostic poem written to the artwork in the Museum of Fine Arts called Coastal Scene with Shipping and Cattle by Thomas Gainsborough. He never thought I would be seeing it. He didn't know when he painted this centuries ago that there would be someone like me writing a book. So I am his future. So I like the idea that in an archive, there's somebody out there, just like that idea of planting a tree for the future, that may someday read this poem, and they would be my future. And the reason I want to read it to you is that it's really about how something that you see, perhaps in an archive or in a museum or something, triggers a memory for you from your own childhood or your own life. But it would not be there to trigger your memory if an institution had not saved it, if they have not felt it was valuable. So an archive believes things are valuable and saves them so that someone in the future can read it. And a museum saves artworks because they feel that they're important, so that someone like me can look at an artwork, write a poem about it, and about my pet cow generated by the artwork. So it's called Art Preserves What Can't Be Saved. One cow separates herself from the herd, stretches her neck too far if you grew up hugging cows. She stands on a cliff, which our timid, clumsy animals would never do, and points her horns toward incoming ships. This is a fictional cow, artifice from a painter's brush. Yet the way she lifts her head, smells the sea air, seems real, as if she thinks she's come to the end of senses, a reward of salt. Once I sailed away on the broad back of a pet cow brown as this one. We were unpartable shadows, inventing our shapes in the summer creek, splashing through ripples of tadpoles, pushing against the current, believing we were going somewhere. But eventually flowing back home, happy and wet as the newly hatched frogs, singing from the tip of her dripping tail. Under the museum lights, the cow vanishes in the glare of varnish, as if its thinly painted body needed to escape from the intensity of eyes. My cow never returned from the dark barn of profit. I thought she would always be there. Like a childhood dress, I imagine I can still wear. I left the calm mythology of farms, never expected to see her again, safe in a gold frame, Other people pass by quickly. It's only a painting of a cow and clouds, nothing they need to reclaim. I should move on too. The guard is growing uneasy. He doesn't know this is my memory pinned to the wall, that I am riding the warm back of a sweet cow, coaxing her down the dangerous cliff to the edge of the painting where we jump the frame's fence. So you see how something you collect might become something for someone else's memory of a cow that I had a long time ago. Who knew, you know? It's wonderful. So I really encourage all of you to look at all three podcasts, find a way to do it yourself, and save the stories, because I start wondering has really made me think about a lot of things, and Brenda has, and I know that you will too once you start going through all the possessions you have. Be a preservationist like Brenda and I.
Carolyn, thank you again. This has been magnificent, and I can't wait to hear how other women are going to embark on this journey. Thanks to your inspiration.
Good.
Well, many blessings.